Story 1. I was raised on a Seventh-day compound, and you wouldn't know where it was if I said it. Idaho. Common themes of training included racism, sexism, and moral superiority. Physical abuse and excessive child labor were the predominant training tools. While I attended public school, I was regularly separated from my peers when they studied certain topics about culture, science, history, and sex because every year, my parents would sit down with the school administrators and my teachers to assert their religious rights and parental authority. I had an inkling that I was a gayish person in high school, but I was actively suppressing myself. I went directly from that to military service. The brainwashing and personal deconstruction from the compound were so very effective that military training didn't take. I found out in the middle of my brief career that I liked dudes, and I started seeking out dangerous, anonymous sexual encounters in the name of having any kind of validating experience. During that, after receiving an administrative discharge, it took me another 7-ish years to figure out that I desperately needed therapy. It was only after that when I began learning about myself and experiencing our culture. I feel like a foreigner among my own people. Toxic masculinity and religiously founded self-doubt still sabotage me sometimes. I'm a little frustrated by the Kimmy Schmidt show because now people think I'm making shit up just to get away with acting crazy. I'm 37 YO, and there are still times when I will hear a noise in the middle of the night, reach for a weapon that isn't there, and then have a brief panic attack that my father is about to come into the room and begin beating the shit out of me among interrogative shouts about why I'm not combat ready. I have to warn those that share a bed with me overnight that I might begin shouting at or physically assaulting them in my sleep because of dreams I can't control. It makes having a relationship for long very hard. About once a year, a repressed memory surfaces, and it could happen at any time for any reason. Anything could be a trigger. I don't get to be anything like normal, ever. Jobs, Christianity, human interactions, emotions, churches, and conflict present significant challenges and are peppered with triggers. And please don't comment to tell me that no one is normal. Please, just don't. That's garbage advice and cold comfort. When you exist on the extreme outside of most bell curves and have your entire life, you find that society is quick to highlight just how abnormal you are. I still resent being born in spite of not being suicidal anymore. Edit. I want to be clear that I am aware that my experience doesn't characterize Christianity or Adventism as a whole. That does not change that those were the flavor of my abuse. Story 2. Does small-town Southern Christianity with an all-black member church surrounded by practicing families in the Bible Belt count as a cult? As I get older, the more I realize they have cult tendencies. My grandma and aunt are high-up ministers, and I was in church since I can remember. I never played with ANY kids outside of family or the church, as we went daily. I was always treated as a pastor's child, expected to uphold their beliefs and never act out as it could blow back on my family. It feels like I have been unbrainwashing for the past 13 years, turning 30 in August. It was only when I hit about 18 years old that I stopped trying to calculate how long I would burn in eternal hellfire for each sin. I treated my sins like balancing a checkbook my whole life. I still remember all of the Sunday chants and prayers that are said throughout the service. I go back once or twice a year to support my grandma and see her give a sermon. They have stopped trying to draw me back in. They are now just happy to see me. Even now, as I will be getting married, and I have been with the same guy for years, sex is difficult for me to get into because my mind sees it as super bad. I don't desire touch like my fiancé does. That's because any urges I felt as a teen, I ignored. And even felt like I was unpure for wanting those things. My fiancé is patient and helping me to get in touch with that part of me. Not saying I'm a stick in the mud either though. LOL. Story 3. I was born in a church that focused on Christianity but had very tribe-like ideologies. like marrying in families inside this church and keeping yourself pure for your future husband, wife. I've talked to groups from other families about that, and there are a lot of doubts from those kids who have been drilled about this ideology. They don't know anything about establishing relationships, and all their family says is, have kids. I was lucky because I was always more connected to the outside world than other kids in this movement. Another thing I know is a lot of those kids who got divorced eventually because their own parents pushed for those marriages between families. And it doesn't work out. There were a lot of twisted things that were taught to the young generation in this church that made it seem like we were more superior to the outside world. Everything that was portrayed as romantic sex was sign if it's not between married partners. And that God was the center in the family always. I was always questioning everything about this ideology. Like they said, this belief was only for people who are pure. But if that's the case, how do they even define what pure is? Like, how do they know the person they are trying to witness is even pure? It's not like people have it tattooed on their foreheads. I would say that I carry some of those beliefs in my life even now. But I can also say that a lot of those beliefs that I thankfully do not follow are very questionable when you look at them from a broader perspective. It is a very cult-like mentality of isolation for better control on people. Also, because my parents were pretty front lines when it came to this church cult, I have seen a lot of contradiction in it. Like, we have to take care of each other like family, but the moment something happens between families, it's a feud that can go a bit too much nuclear revenge type. Also, a lot of backstabbers when it comes to money or power positions, so yeah? I'm kinda glad I was never dragged too deep into following those crazy tribal beliefs my parents accented and understood how toxic it has become in it, and it gave me a better stand to have a strong stand in life as well. To not be ever dragged into those kinds of old brainwashing in the future. Story 4. I grew up in an evangelical church that is based in Boston but has offshoots around the world. It was called the Boston Church of Christ, and later known as the International Churches of Christ. While not Jonestown levels of culty, they are definitely the type of organization that thinks they are the only way to do things, the only true form of Christianity. They discourage dating and marrying outside the church. They discourage deep friendships outside the church. Any outside friends or family are just potential new members. They pair you up with someone to be your discipleship partner, and that's the person you essentially confess sins to, even though they aren't ordained or anything. It was the kind of church that celebrated people giving their life savings to the church. A few times they actually held special services to talk about how people weren't giving enough. They had graphs and everything. I haven't been sincerely, anyways, for over a decade, and my parents still try to bring me back in. I'm an atheist and don't go to any church. But if I started going to another church, they'd still be trying to bring me back in. Before we wrap up, remember to show your support by smashing that like button, subscribing for more captivating content, sharing with a friend, and dropping a comment with your favorite story down below. Your engagement fuels our passion to bring you even more incredible content. Until next time, take care and goodbye for now.